Hey guys, how you doing? It is Thursday morning, September 14th. Happy Thursday to all you folks. Everybody's kind of got their eye on Friday, getting closer to the weekend. Got a really great topic for you guys today, one which I think a lot of people out there are going to think about and are going to be able to empathize with. Today we're going to talk about jumping ship. We're going to talk about when you need to start looking for those signs that it's time to go and time to move on and do something new with your career, with your job, with your life. Definitely, it's a hot topic. It's something that a lot of people are thinking about these days. I'm doing this Vcast on the back of a popular post that I wrote a couple of weeks ago called Jumping Ship. If you haven't seen it, you can also read it on my blog, mattbork.com/blog. It's been crazy how many views that blog post has had. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it would be really cool to do this Vcast to talk about it. I think I got something like 15,000 views of that post in the first 12 hours. And then the folks at Business Insider were nice enough to reprint it, and I got another 28,000 views. So big topic, and I'm going to dive right into it. I'm going to try and make this Vcast a little bit shorter than some of the other ones because I realize that sometimes like 20, 25 minutes is a lot of time for folks. So want to be conscious of your time, make sure you get what you need. Hopefully this is useful to you. And I also have a number of follow-up posts to this Vcast which talk about other things, such as, okay, once you've decided to quit, what do you do, right? So how do you figure out what you want to do next? And then I just published a post last week about job interview best practices. So what kind of questions should you anticipate? What kind of questions should you ask when you go to a job interview that you're excited about, et cetera? So let's talk about when is the sign to potentially think of what are the signs to keep in mind if you should be quitting your job? What should you be paying attention to? Well, first things first. One of the things that I kind of have learned, over the kind of 20 plus years that I've been working, is I have a really basic formula for my job happiness and for staying kind of in the groove and being happy with what I'm doing, and I call it kind of the Mad Mork happiness formula. And essentially, the Mad Mork happiness formula is pretty simple. It's basically as long as my positive energy level, which I call PET, as long as positive energy level is greater than negative energy level, right? As long as the number of positive tasks that I'm doing on average in my day-to-day job, day-to-day, week-to-week, is greater than the number of negative energy tasks, then I'm a pretty happy person. Right? And if you think about it, that's intuitive. That makes sense, right? If you're doing things that you enjoy doing, like say you like coding, or say you like drawing, or say you like writing, and you're doing more of that kind of stuff, then you're doing negative energy tasks. So by negative energy tasks, I mean tasks that basically suck out a lot of negative, energy. Like they just make you feel like grouchy, annoyed, pissed off, like doing your taxes, right? How many people out there like doing their taxes? Unless you're an accountant, probably nobody, right? Doing taxes is a negative energy producing task, right? So as long as your personal kind of formula, your personal equilibrium is you have a greater amount of tasks that you're doing that are positive energy creating versus tasks that you're doing that are negative energy creating, you're generally in a pretty good place, right? And so therefore, when you think about it, the time to quit is when you get to a point where basically the number of negative energy tasks that you're doing are typically much greater or greater than those that create positive energy day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, right? So when you get into that groove where you're going to the office, or you're going to work and you're like, every time you pull up to the parking lot, your gut kind of just like sinks in your stomach and you kind of rub your face and do one of these and you're like, oh, Jesus, another day at work. And you realize that because a lot of that is because you have to do a whole bunch of things that create negative energy, and that's happening to you all the time, and you don't see any end to it, that's when you know something's out of whack, right? So that's my formula, if you will, right? Positive energy tasks are greater than negative energy tasks. That means I'm happy. Pretty simple, right? So let's talk a little bit about the signs. So, in my post, I talked about 7 signs. So it's kind of like, there's probably a movie on this, like 7 signs of, the kingdom come or whatever. But anyway, 7 signs that you need to watch out for and keep tabs on that could lead you to consider that you might need to make a change in your career. The first one is around growth and learning, right? And so, as kind of human beings and creatures of curiosity and knowledge, we're gifted with this brain, right, which is a good and bad thing. And we're always learning, we're always growing, we're learning new things. And so one of the tasks I always look for is, do I feel like I'm learning on this job? Do I feel like I'm growing, like I'm developing professionally? I'm excited about what I'm doing, and I'm positive about where my career can go from here. That's a really important task. Why? Because, the path to kind of like career progression, to having a successful career, means growth. It means that you need to be learning. Even if you're the greatest, content acquisition marketer, on the planet, if you're doing the same thing year in, year out, every day, and you don't feel like you're learning, you're not picking up new skills, you're not picking up new tools, you're not getting to see new parts of the business, eventually you get bored. And eventually, not only do you get bored, which is a bad thing, but eventually, you realize that you're not learning anything. And so you're not going to be able to progress your career to the next level, right? So you want to be kind of constantly growing and learning. And, the other thing that's important with that is you want to be in an environment where your manager and the company are also encouraging you to grow and learn, and are hopefully providing you with opportunities, either on the job training or online learning, or maybe going off to, a seminar or something, or a leadership summit. You want to be in an environment where people are encouraging you to grow beyond your comfort zone and are interested in your personal development. If you have been asking your manager for 6 months to be able to take a, course on, learning, Microsoft Excel, or, you want to take a course in marketing, or you want to take a course in accounting, and the organization just doesn't have any bandwidth, or it's not a priority, well, you may want to start thinking whether that's the right environment for you, because you're not going to be able to progress and grow, right? And if you can't grow, that's going to kind of limit your potential from a career perspective. So that's the first sign. The second sign is appreciation, right? And, if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow was, I think, a psychologist who wrote a lot about kind of human behavior and basic human needs. You can Google this up online. You can Google up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow has a pyramid, and in that pyramid, he describes like the basic things that humans need to feel fulfilled and content in their lives. And, once you get past basic things like, physical security, having a roof over your head and having food and having shelter and things like that, one of the things that becomes important to human beings, to all of us, is, psychological needs, right? And within psychological needs, one of the needs that's very important is self-esteem, right? It's our ability to feel good about ourselves, about who we are and what we're doing and those kind of things. And so kind of like an appreciation for your work is a pretty important thing, right? If you're going in and you're busting your tail, day in, day out, you're working nights, you're working weekends or whatever, and your boss kind of, never gives you any credit for that, or the organization doesn't seem to care, or your coworkers don't seem to care, that's not a good thing, right? That stuff slowly eats away at you. And, even people who are really good at what they do and really confident, inevitably that will chip away at your self-confidence, right? So, having an understanding with your manager and having the appreciation of your organization for what you're doing, that's a really important part of building and maintaining your self-esteem. And so if you're not getting that appreciation at work, you might want to start thinking about, well, if these guys don't really appreciate what I'm doing, kind of why am I here? Kind of thing. That's number two. Number three is, this is an important one as well, is kind of like, do you feel like you're leveraging your core strengths, right? There's a great book on this called Strength Finder, and you can look this up online as well. There's a website for this called the Gallup Strength Finder version 2.0. And, Strength Finder basically, helps people kind of sort out their professional careers and assess kind of how well they're doing by encouraging you to focus on leveraging your strengths. What are the things that you're good at? People are different, right? Some people are more left-brain, they're more quantitative, they're more into math and sciences and hard skills. Programming, being an example. Some people are more right-brain, they're more creative, they like drawing, they like creating ad campaigns, they're social media experts, or they're into public relations, right? For you to keep your equation in balance, right, for you to have more positive energy than negative energy, you want to be leveraging your core strengths. You want to be doing things that you're good at. Now, not all the time, because obviously when we go back to the first point that we talked about, which is growth and learning, If you're only doing things that you're good at, then you might not be learning new skills, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But you want to be working in a job that you enjoy, that really leverages the things that you're good at, right? Because it's good for your self-esteem. It's good for your relationship with your coworkers, your manager, etc. You go home a happier person. When you're a happier person, your partner's happy, your kids are happy, etc. Right? So if you're in a job where it's a grind and you're really not doing the things that you're good at, like say, for example, you're an engineer, right? You love coding, and you've just been promoted to manager, and it's a grind because you spend all your time kind of like worrying about other people's problems and hiring people and doing interviews and doing reporting and doing peer reviews. And all of a sudden you realize, holy shit, I'm not doing the stuff I learned, the stuff I enjoy doing anymore. I'm not really leveraging my strengths. Then sooner or later, that's going to get to you, right? So keeping track of how much time you're spending on doing things that you really enjoy doing, your strengths, versus other things, that's an important point. I think a lot of people are going to relate to the fourth one. So number 4 is what I call negative team dynamics, or NTD. And negative team dynamics happens in a lot of organizations, and we've all been there, right? Especially when things are not going well in a company, you have a product launch maybe that hasn't panned out the way you wanted, your revenues are coming in flat this quarter, your software program that you're working on has a ton of bugs and is going back to QA for like the 15th time. Whatever that may be, oftentimes when there are problems in an organization, sometimes depending on the organization's culture, you get a lot of backbiting. You'll get a lot of finger pointing, and he did this, and he didn't do his job, or he sucks, or this is bad, or whatever. And nobody wants to take responsibility, and everybody's kind of blaming the other person, right? So, when you get in a situation where you have a lot of negative team dynamics, and the negative team dynamics are like continuous, and it doesn't seem to be ending, and it's kind of like constant, that's a real issue, right? It can become particularly bad when you feel that, management or human resource or whoever is not really kind of stepping in to correct the problem, right? Good managers, they'll identify this stuff pretty early on, and they'll nip it in the bud, right? They'll sit down with the people one-on-one and be like, hey, what's going on? Why do you have this problem with this other person? Why do you feel that it's somebody else's responsibility? Why are you so angry? When you don't have management stepping in, or when you don't have the organization stepping in to sort things out, and things are just kind of left there festering, that can create a really toxic environment, which is not a fun place to be. And so if you're stuck in an environment like that, where it's like, it's not just a couple of weeks or a couple of months, it's like, quarter after quarter of negative team dynamics, then it might be, signs that you need to kind of start looking for an exit and looking for, a different opportunity somewhere. Fifth, constantly changing priorities. This happens a lot, especially in earlier stage companies and small organizations, where the market's changing very quickly, or you lose people, or competition does things and your market changes. It's okay to be in a crisis. I mean, like, crises do happen, right? But and priorities do change. The challenge is kind of like when your priorities are constantly changing, right? Because your manager changes his mind for like the 5th time that quarter, or the board doesn't seem to know what they want, or the CEO doesn't seem to know what he's doing, and is like, oh, let's do this feature now, and let's do that. No, let's not launch this, let's launch that. That's like really discouraging for people, and people rapidly lose motivation, and they rapidly lose trust in management when priorities are changing all the time. It's one thing where, for example, your manager or your CEO, whoever, department lead might step in and sit everybody down and kind of take you guys through the rationale and explain why things are changing, and give you guys a really good understanding of, here's what's happening in the market, here's what the customer requested, here's why it's important, and really sits you through and explains that, versus, just another change, right? Another change, another change, another change. So if you find, that your priorities are constantly changing all the time, and it's making it really difficult for you to do your job, and you don't see any end to it, and this is going on again for like not just one quarter, but quarter after quarter, or after a year or 2 years, then again, you really have to rethink things, because to me, when priorities are constantly changing like that, potentially it's a sign that management doesn't really know what they're doing, or that your manager doesn't really have a clear idea of what he or she needs to prioritize and get done, and that slowly but surely is going to start to affect your work and your morale and the morale of the team around you, right? So constant changing priorities, bad thing, particularly if it's going on for a while. Think about changing. Sixth, this happens to a lot of organizations, particularly ones that are successful. They start to believe their own bullshit, and believing your own bullshit can become a problem long term when, an organization or a manager or a CEO or something thinks that they have all the answers. Because then there's kind of this creeping kind of arrogance that gets into the organization, and this idea that we can do no wrong and we can make no mistakes, and sooner or later that does catch up with you. And I think the industry, business is littered with examples of people who have done this, of like all shapes and sizes, right? In Silicon Valley, we see startups every day that went through this. I mean, I've met a number of startups like that started to believe they were infallible. I mean, I worked in a company called GetJar, which was one of the leading app stores back in 2007. When apps were running on feature phones, and we had so much traffic and had so much visibility in the press that we were on top of the world. I thought we could do no wrong, and then all of a sudden the market changed and things got a lot tougher, right? And when you see that happening and you see that management is not paying attention to what's happening in the market, or they're not listening to customers, or they're not really paying attention to what competitors are doing, and they think they have all the answers, that sooner or later is going to become a problem. And that is going to affect your job. It could affect your job security. It could affect the security of the company, right? Some great examples to think about, BlackBerry. I mean, who the hell still uses a BlackBerry phone? Remember BlackBerry? They used to own the smartphone market, when it came to like enterprise customers. They didn't pay attention to what was happening in the market. Another great example in phones, Nokia. I mean, who uses a Nokia phone anymore? Nobody, right? I mean, they were never big in the States, but outside the U.S., they had huge market share. I lived and worked in Europe for a while, and, these guys, they probably had 50, 60, 70% of the market in some cases. But, they were convinced that nobody was going to use a phone that was made by Apple. Nobody was going to use a smartphone that had a touchscreen. They didn't listen to the market. They didn't look at what competitors were doing. They thought they had all the answers, and we all know how that turned out, right? So believing your own bullshit, that's a really bad sign, and if it's going on for, a year, 2 years, etc., that's a sign maybe to look for the exit. Left the best for last, but the last one that comes to mind that I've seen as well is the idea of the never-ending crisis, right? Oh my God, it's a crisis. We got to work this weekend, or there's another crisis. You have to come into work on a Saturday, or you have to work till 2 a.m. to get things done. Especially if you're working in small companies or startups and things like that, or you have your own business. You're gonna have times when things just hit the fan, and you need to put in those extra hours, or you need to work on a weekend, or you need to bring in your team, and you need to put the pedal to the metal and get people to over deliver and work under a lot of pressure, and that's okay. Like, we all go through stuff like that. The problem really ends up being when it's constant, like it's just never ending, right? It's not just a couple of weekends. It's like the norm becomes to work on weekends. The norm becomes working until 11, 12, 1 a.m. every day. There's always a crisis. It's always urgent. That, for me, is a sign of an organization that's not properly run. You can't run teams like that. You can't run an organization like that. If you run people flat out like that and they never get a break, they burn out, right? And if your management or your manager doesn't care about burnout, that means basically that you're going to lose people, and ultimately it's going to impact you. You're going to find that if a couple of your coworkers leave or get sick, well, guess what? You're going to be the one who picks up the slack. You're going to be the one putting in extra hours, right? So, when you have never-ending crisis, that's generally not a really good thing, and you generally want to be looking for, alternatives there as well. And, keep in mind that, there's a couple of rules of thumb I'll leave you guys with as we wrap this up today. The first is you're always better off looking for a job when you have a job, right? Take it from me. I've been there. I've done that. You want to be open to opportunities and networking, looking for a job when you have a steady paycheck and you have some options, right? When you don't have a job, it becomes a lot harder. It starts to affect your self-confidence. You can find yourself in a really tough spot financially. So, if you're starting to see some of these signs that I just mentioned, my 7 signs, and they're recurring all the time, you want to start looking and getting out there. The other thing that's great is when you start looking and getting out there and you get some positive feedback from people and other companies and potential employers, it's going to boost your self-confidence. You're going to feel better about yourself, right? Which is important, right? Self-esteem is pretty important, as we talked about under rule number 2, appreciation. But, the second kind of rule of thumb I'll leave you guys with to think about as well is don't think about these signs in isolation of like, oh my God, I saw a number of examples over a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. You can't just, decide to jump ship and go from job to job that quickly, right? I think one of the dangers we have today in our society is everybody's looking for a silver bullet. Everybody's looking for the perfect job or, the perfect partner, etc. And it's not always like that. Some jobs you have to give them a chance. Some managers you have to give them a chance. One of the things that we didn't talk about was the tyrannical manager. We didn't talk about bad bosses because that would be a whole blog post in itself or a whole video all by itself. So I'll deal with that one later. But on average, my rule of thumb is you should be in a job at least somewhere between 8 to 16, 17, and 18 months. Before you get to the conclusion, really, that's not manageable, right? And the reason I'm saying that is if you go into a job and you just do it for like 3 or 4 months or 6 months, and then you start poking around looking for other opportunities, prospective employers are going to see that, and they're going to wonder how serious you are. They're going to be like, oh, this guy's only been there 3 months, and it's not working out. It's like, what the heck? It's different if you get laid off, right? And that's a separate conversation. If you get laid off from a job, that's different. But if you go into a job and you start looking after 3, 4, 5, or 6 months, it also says something about you because it says that potentially you didn't do your homework or you didn't go in with your eyes wide open about this opportunity and you didn't really ask the right questions in terms of the culture and what was expected. So you got to be careful about jumping around too much and going from one job to the next too quickly. But yeah, if you've been there a year or a year and a half and you're seeing this stuff all the time, your best bet is start networking, start talking to people. I have a blog post on my blog that talks about the best ways to do that and how to find your next gig. So again, if you want, check that out, madmork.com/blog. And that's it, guys. So 7 signs: growth and learning, appreciation, inability to leverage your core strengths, constantly changing priorities, negative team dynamics, believing your own bullshit, and the never-ending crisis. So those are the 7 signs. I put up 10 fingers. Nice. 7 signs that you want to keep, top of mind as you're working, and make sure that those are not repeating themselves too often, because it's just going to throw your formula out of whack, and you're going to be doing things that are creating a lot of negative energy. You're going to be miserable. You're going to be unhappy, and more importantly, you're going to make people that in your personal life unhappy, right? Because it rubs off. So I hope that's super helpful. Feel free to leave any comments. Like this video. If you haven't subscribed and this is helpful to you, subscribe. That would be great. If you think that somebody else really needs to hear what I'm saying here because they're in that situation and they're not seeing the signs, by all means, share the video as well. And there's a lot of great stuff on my blog as well, madmork.com/blog. Make sure to check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/madmorkstories. And thanks for your time as always. I hope this was super useful. And enjoy the rest of your day and have a killer weekend. Well, it's still 2 days away, but have a killer weekend when you get there. All right, thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one. Bye.